This podcast is presented by Castrol Edge Euro, the #1 brand recommended by technicians in Europe. Did you know that almost 50% of European vehicles in Canada come factory filled with Edge Euro? Offer better oil. Offer your customer Castrol Edge Euro. Questions? Contact your local auto parts distributor, or Wakefield Territory Sales Manager, or customer service at 1-800-268-5339. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Ross. Now, there's no secret to the fact that there's been a rise in Canadian sentiment over the last little while. So here today to speak to that and give a little feedback about how that might be playing out in the automotive aftermarket is Bob Jaworski. He's the owner of Auto Electric Service in Regina, Saskatchewan, and branches throughout, as well as a former chair of the Automotive Industries Association of Canada, and the soon-to-be latest recipient of the Distinguished Service Award, the highest honor from the association. Welcome to the podcast, Bob. So again, hi, Bob.
Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm good. So, we're in, interesting times, I guess is one way to put it. But like, I noticed you're one of among the businesses I started to see at least leaning a little bit more heavily into kind of the Canadian identity than maybe in the past. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, it would be. Probably as being a Saskatchewan-owned and operated company, since 1943, we've always kind of promoted that side of it, the provincial, but obviously we want to show some of our Canadian pride, so we're extending and tying in the Canadian aspect. Obviously, if we're Saskatchewan-owned, we're Canadian-owned, but we are proud of our country, and we're going to make sure in our programming and logoing and things like that we're tying in both Saskatchewan and Canada into that logoing. So.
Yeah. Is this something that you're seeing kind of reflected or, in kind of the industry? I mean, I know that we're all seeing it in, the overall market. I mean, most acutely people are noticing it at the grocery stores, right? But because they see that every day. But is it something that from an aftermarket standpoint, you're seeing more of, or at least grappling with kind of this question? Because it's, it's a complex market, right?
Yeah, I think it's more the grappling with, because it's trying to figure out what's coming from where. So, it was interesting because we, are asking suppliers where it is. Like, it was interesting even last week we had a conversation with Shell, and to my surprise, a lot of their production is in Canada. So, I thought, well, for sure this product's coming out of the U.S., but a lot of it was actually coming out of Canada that we had. Now, Castrol is another one that, Canadian-made product. So where we're aware of the product being, made in Canada, or if we have Canadian distribution like Metaltech, those kind of product lines, we're doing some featuring on and talking about, the Canadian side of things. So, we're probably bringing it to the forefront a little bit. I know from a logoing standpoint and things like that in our stores, we're in process of, being patriotic and flying some Saskatchewan and Canada flags. And, we're just, trying to get some of that stuff up and going. Our Facebook, we've tied in some ads about being, Canadian operated. So the industry as a whole, though, I think there's a lot of confusion about where does product come from, because is it coming from the U.S., is it coming from Canada, is it coming from China, or all over the world? So I think that there's going to be some of those things sorted out before we can get too brand specific on products. So.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody, like you've spent a little bit of time in the aftermarket, I mean, it really is a global supply chain, right? So, we see even, significant amount of the sort of what is at the kind of last gasp, sort of north-south product flow is, as you suggest, coming from elsewhere. I mean, there's a lot of European product that comes up through that way, and a lot of course, Pacific Rim sourcing product, and precious little of it actually made, in frankly, North America to a large extent. Is that fair? Yeah.
No, I would agree with that. That's why from our standpoint, we're cautious in what we say about what product line, because maybe stuff that's made from numerous countries within any given product line. So you can't say, oh, this is U.S. made product. It used to be the big thing. That was something you could hang your hat on. It was U.S. made. Well, just because it came from the U.S. doesn't mean it was U.S. made. So nowadays, unless you really look at the box and find the product of origin, you can't tell where that product's coming from. So, we back off that. We do have our industrial side of our business. We're a member of AIA Industrial, and they are flagging their product. The manufacturers who are Canadian, they're putting out flyers and just specific to the fact that this is Canadian-made product. And so that kind of thing we can tie in really easy because, we've got that from our vendors that, these products are Canadian-made. So when we see that, then we're certainly tying into that type of flagging. So
yeah, obviously you see it as being, as we all see, a trend for this kind of pro-Canadian sentiment. How are you handling it as far as not turning it into anti anything else sentiment? Because as you say, we have global supply chains, right?
Yeah, I'm very cautious. We belong to a buying group that is centered in the U.S., with the Alliance, and we're extremely proud of that relationship we have with them. The things that are going on right now, it's going to take some time to determine, is this just negotiating, is it anti? It's obviously upsetting a lot of people, and it could have long-term consequences, but I think that we're so early into it that I think things might have to play out a little bit before it becomes anything where there's truly becomes any type of anti-American issue. I've got a lot of very good friends that are Americans, and I do not hold anything against them for being American. So that side of it is sometimes you get caught up in things, but at the same time, the things that are happening where we're booing national anthems and stuff like that, that's quite concerning. And actually, I was at a Oilers game on Saturday night in Edmonton, and there was the odd person who was booing, but there was a lot more people who were actually singing the U.S. national anthem. And so I thought, well, okay, we're starting to get back on track from that standpoint. And then obviously when the Canadian anthem sang, they really didn't even need the person on the ice singing because the whole crowd was singing. But it wasn't what was happening, kind of right after some of this stuff was occurring where all you could hear was boos. That wasn't the case in Edmonton, and I was glad, not to see or hear that. So
yeah, because again, as you suggest, we have long-term relationships, both business and personal, and I have family in the U.S. too. It's
yeah,
and these other kind of maneuverings, whatever you want to call them, they're happening. I guess the phrase is way above my pay grade.
And it's not just picking on Canada. It's happening around the world. So everybody's in that. So you just got to look at what the situation is. Is this, we'll let it play out and see. I don't think in the long run anyone wants to do anything that's going to negatively affect their countries or economies. So I think that there's the initial leveraging that's trying to go on, but whether that, where that all goes in the long run, time will tell, but I think there could be certainly areas of our economies that are impacted, and I guess we'll wait and see. The automotive side, we've certainly made some adjustments already. Where obviously we've bought on some lines where we expect because of the Canadian tariffs is going to have the effect, not the U.S. tariffs, because we're an importer, not an exporter. And so we bought on lines to beat any tariff increases that way, so we can at least find out what's going on in the longer term from pricing from our suppliers. Which from that standpoint, Alliance has been very good. Any price increase that's coming through our group is being marked as the reason for the price increase if it's tariff related and so on. So we're we are watching that information very closely, and our group's doing a good job of, tracking to see what the effect is. But certainly, some of this brought to mind like what happened in COVID when we had all the price increases and everything else, and you had this artificial gain in price of product because of supply. And so I don't know whether we're going to see more of that happen in Canada or not. But one thing in the aftermarket is, for the most part, we're just passing it through. So the unfortunate person is going to be the end purchaser that's going to pay the price for it. So from our standpoint, it's kind of business as usual, but you're selling everything at a higher price. And I guess if you could say the positive thing from our own businesses is that our gross profit margins, you're making your margins off that higher price too. So it's not how you want to make money, but it is a part of our way of making money. So.
Right. It's kind of, unless you're prepared to, take a cost plus that kind of standpoint, which gets very, very tricky. Right. And
yeah,
you'll end up probably seeing a negative impact on your bottom line that way.
Yeah.
Bringing it back home to the Canadian pro-Canadian sentiment. I mean, have you had any feedback from the customer base on this, or is it something that you've picked up from the customer base and are acting on that kind of accord?
Yeah, I can't say that we've had a tremendous amount come from the customer base. I've got, friends and family that, they're making a point of shopping, where if they have an option of buying a Canadian product versus a U.S. product, they will buy the Canadian, even if it does cost them a little bit more. So if that type of trending is happening, at a personal level, and most of that comes around the groceries, as you mentioned before, but, there is that sentiment out there that they want to support Canada, which I think is a great thing. I think we should always support our own country and do whatever we can to have a vibrant country. So I think from that standpoint, this whole tariff thing could be a very good thing for Canada in the long run if it helps us as a country to be much better trading partners within our own country, as well as maybe, be more cognizant of, our own borders and things like that, and, put some budget money in place to be a sovereign country. So.
Yeah, I mean, as for those who aren't kind of aware, and maybe listening from outside of Canada to this, I mean, we actually have far more generally barriers between our provinces for trade and mobility of professionals and all that than we have between Canada and the U.S. At least traditionally. So it's something that's being addressed now, and there seems to be a real impetus to pull together and make sure that we're maximizing our own kind of domestic economy, right?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. So, having said that, do you get the sense that this is something that is, as far as, again, the pro-Canadian sentiment is something that is going to be going to have staying power, or?
I guess I'm not going to put a time frame on it because, the only thing I've ever seen in the past is that people are, up in arms for a short period of time, but over a period of time, things tend to lax. But if you can make the structural changes to your economies and things like that, then I think it'll have a longer staying power. If it just becomes, okay, tariffs are off, are people going to revert back to what they were doing before? I would say in most cases, there's going to be a group of people, whatever percentage of that is, they're going to be cognizant of it and always want to, buy Canadian. But there was certainly that group of people that were out there before any of this happened, that they want to, buy Canadian and things like that. But I think what you may see is that there'll be a lot better logoing and things like that, identifying products that are made in Canada, and then businesses will be more cognizant of it and promote the fact that their products, are made in Canada. Might not necessarily be aftermarket related, but a lot of other products, and I think, that are manufactured in Canada, I think you'll start seeing more of that. And I think that's a good thing, that we should be promoting products that are manufactured in Canada. And I think we should manufacture more products in Canada. Like, I'm amazed at where we take the raw materials and ship them to be processed all over the world, and we don't do a lot of that ourselves. I think that there should be more of that trend for our economy, that we're, not just a shipper of the raw material, but we're an actual manufacturer, producer of the product.
Sure. Now, from your standpoint, as you say, you're being more kind of nationally inclusive in the sort of signage and identity for auto electric service. That sounds like it's something that you're going to stick with, though, right?
Yeah. Like, I think from our logoing standpoint, tying in a Canadian and Saskatchewan flag into our logoing, and our just the terminology of Canadian owned and operated, serving Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan since 1943, is going to be a line that goes on all of our special sheets, all of those things that are tying in the fact that we are Canadian and locally owned and operated. So very easy it's just part of our bannering when we do our special sheets.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from when I look at kind of the larger aftermarket in Canada, by its very nature, so much of the aftermarket here actually is, local Canadian owned and operated businesses, right? I mean, that's a good story too, right?
Yeah, and certainly there's lots of affiliation to U.S. distributors, but the businesses themselves, where the people that are operating the business are Canadians, and the money is staying for the most part in the local markets, and so that's a real positive in the fact that the business owners, and I think when you talk, in local markets, are more willing to, from charity and all of those kind of things, and just the social makeup of the areas that we work out of, is that we're trying to support the local as much as possible. So,
well, it makes a whole lot of sense. Thanks, Bob. So in thinking about the rise in Canadian sentiment and talking to others, occurred to me I should give an old friend a call who certainly by name, if nothing else, can be strongly connected historically to Canadian history. So John MacDonald, known amongst his friends and others as Satch MacDonald, is part of the Ideal Supply family for generations, and although he has been out of the day-to-day with the aftermarket to some extent for a while, he's still very much in touch with what's going on. Is that a fair comment, Satch?
Yes, it is. Yep, Andrew, good to hear from you. And still in contact with many people and companies within the aftermarket from time to time. So it's good to have open dialogue with each of them.
Yeah. So what's your take on what's happening with the kind of rise in Canadian sentiment in the marketplace?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think if anything, it has made a lot of Canadians wake up and realize just how proud we are to be Canadian and how we support each other when times get tough, or when kind of the path forward doesn't necessarily look as bright and as promising as what we all had anticipated. I think, kind of through the last few months since President Trump has taken office, there's been a lot of back and forth between both governments, and it has made a lot of Canadians uneasy on kind of where their businesses are, where their finances are, which has been proven in the markets. And then, the automotive sector as a whole is certainly with new car development and new car manufacturing, what that will look like if the tariffs actually take effect in the automotive sector. I don't know, but I'd be surprised if at the end of the day, the automotive new car manufacturing is affected or is brought into the fold of tariffs, just from the wide breadth of damage that it would cause. But I may be wrong.
Right. Yeah. I think everybody's sort of playing a bit of a guessing game, right? But you know,
Right.
for those of us on the ground floor here, I mean, I always, you know, my previous conversation, you know, was sort of the you know, all those kinds of things that are kind of above my pay grade, you know, and
Right.
and there's not much that a lot of you know, business owners or in the aftermarket can do to affect you know, what's actually happening up there, but at the ground level, there really does seem to be that kind of you know, resurgence in thinking about and you know, putting whether it's you know, amending banners on their stores to indicate, you know, Canadian owned and operated, or other kind of activities. You know, there's definitely a resurgence there. I mean, beyond what you know, we see. I always come back to, you know, at the grocery store we all see it, you know,
Right.
but it's not that simple, you know, necessarily for the aftermarket. But there's still something happening, right?
Right. Yeah, I think if anything for the aftermarket, when you think the 99, if not 99%, if not 100%, although I don't know the exact number, but of independently owned garages are in Canada are owned locally. There's some that are owned by conglomerates and other companies that are widespread, perhaps out of the States. But for your local automotive service provider, it's owned locally, which they provide employment, they give back to the community, they provide, they pay taxes in their community. So I think the consumer needs to remember that, when all the dust settles, who their, John Smith at their local garage is still John Smith at their local garage. If anything, if people are worried about tariffs and what the difference cost, how that changes with kind of the cost that they may incur, just off the top of my head, I would think that preventative maintenance in the automotive aftermarket is probably more important today than it ever has been, just because it will lower your overall cost on your vehicle if you're able to stay ahead of kind of the problems that may arise down the road.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, I keep coming back to this. It's very much a pro story, not an anti story or a running away story. I mean, I think people, as you mentioned, have found kind of found their quiet patriotism and maybe turned it up a notch or two to here. I mean, we don't tend to be a country that's done a lot of flag waving, right? But
Right.
I'm a proud Canadian. I've been had the great honor to do represent my country in competition here and there, doing things when I was younger, and there's nothing quite like that. And I think a lot of people in Canada feel kind of that same way, and this has really forced them to, as you say, to get in touch with that part of their identity in a way that it does feel a bit new, though, right?
Right. Yeah, I think definitely it feels, you're right. We're not a country nor individuals typically that kind of walk around the streets and brag and Canada is the leader in this, that, and everything else, and how strong we are. But I think it comes down to when we're about what we said. We're a quiet nation. We're usually quiet individuals, and we don't toot our own horns until you affect one of our family. And Canada, if we look at nationally, we all protect each other to a certain degree. And if people come at us, then we have a tendency to protect. And where we can make a difference is exactly as you had said, Andrew, is that in the grocery store. If you buy Canadian and go, I don't need to buy that brand that isn't Canadian produced. And it tastes the same. Well, that makes an effect. And whether you believe it or not, like I believe that is going to stay in our minds for a lot longer than the current government. That I believe that we're changing our habits, and I, for one, am not going to change them back anytime soon.
Right, right. Yeah, that's, I guess, the big question. Is this going to be a persistent feeling, or is it just going to be fleeting? And as soon as hopefully, we get through all of this turmoil and things go back to a more normalized situation, do we just go back to, our regular habits, and I guess that remains a question, right, for each individual.
Right. I think it has, made Canada realize where some of our weaknesses are, from as individuals nationally, and where some of our strengths are, and maybe some of our weaknesses we need to improve. We need to improve, obviously, our defense, and we need to improve and add to kind of how we're promoting and help kind of others around the world when needed. But that's not to say that we've done a lot of things wrong over time. This is really driven by an individual in the States that has kind of got it in his mind that tariffs are the way to go down the road. Right. Time will tell whether they are or not. But everybody in Canada, one way or the other, is going to be affected, if not already, actually, by this. Right. And it's a sad state that there's, when you think there's people anxious already because of 101 different things. And this just adds to people feeling uneasy about themselves, about their worth, about kind of their financial stability going forward, which is a shame.
Right. And, me always bringing it back to the aftermarket is that in and of itself, that uncertainty and unease, a place where the aftermarket can provide, some call it, Canadian comfort.
Right. I think I think it can. It would be interesting to see kind of what other companies are doing that are entrenched in the aftermarket. Are they looking at any marketing or kind of means to promote Canadian product, Canadian service, so on and so forth? The other advantage we have, which I'm sure is been thought of a lot, or hopefully they're working on some plans, is the Automotive Industries Association, AIA. Is that they're the aftermarket's really main arm to the government, and it'd be interesting to hear and see what the AIA is doing to kind of help soften, if there is such a thing as a blow in different sectors of the traditional aftermarket.
Yeah, sure. I know as we're recording this, we're looking forward to the AIA Canada's, your annual national conference coming up very shortly. So, right. I'm sure we'll be hearing some then, and probably be hearing more about what they have to say in this space. But John, Satch, as somebody who has sat in some of the big chairs here and there, if you were still in one of those chairs, what would you be doing to your to Satch's job or business? How would you be looking at this, and what would you be trying to accomplish?
Well, I would probably the first thing I would end up doing is making sure our communication is concise and consistent throughout our network of service providers, employees within the company, knowing that things are we're going to have to change quickly in some instances of how, if there's price changes, would our business be able to absorb them, or do we have to pass anything on? I know that Ideal Supply has already talked in the electrical business per se with different contractors on, we can only hold quotes for this amount of time, where before it was quite a bit longer than that. Same in the automotive sector, from equipment, from capital expansion by our clients and so on. But I would make sure that everybody realizes, if nothing else, we are in this together. The sun will come up tomorrow. That is a guarantee. And we will get through this together. That is also a guarantee.
Right. Through it together as a bunch of Canadian independent businesses and professionals, right?
Yeah, I think more, just people working hand in hand and side by each. Is that For our clients, I think the biggest fear amongst everybody would be lack of communication and lack of clarity. So if we're able to continue to have open dialogue with different stakeholders, whomever they may be, then the risk of someone not having all the information or not being able to make a knowledgeable decision because they don't feel they're adequately informed is kept at a minimum.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's, it's more important than just to put the, made in Canada or Canadian owned and operated on the front door, right? I mean, we've got to take that to action in the marketplace, right?
Yeah, I think we all have friends in the United States, and I personally have not talked with one single person who's a U.S. citizen who agrees or believes in what's going on. Right. So it's amazing, and you read so much kind of in the publications and hear on the news that Canada is did nothing wrong. President Trump has stated different things, but we've done nothing wrong. But yet, this is people are wondering: is there a different play to this than what people are seeing on the surface? Well, for Canadians, it's like, okay, let's stand together, let's weather the storm. For the aftermarket, let's make sure that the consumer is fully aware of the quality of products that the aftermarket provides in the marketplace, and that goes across the board. Like, Andrew, the competitors, Napa has a different brand than a Uniselect or a CarQuest or regional players perhaps, but all in all, 99.9% of them are absolutely the best quality they can be in the aftermarket, in the marketplace. So we need to keep reminding our clients at the end of the day that they will be looked after. Nothing will be sold to them that is not the quality that Canada is proud to present day in and day out.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's yeah, I mean, it's a global marketplace, but it's about not necessarily always where the stuff is made. There's limits in a global supply chain, but how it's made, which is critically important to the marketplace. And I don't know, for me, I always get some comfort knowing I'm dealing with with the local owner operators and all that. It's always a really great opportunity to frankly get the best service going. And maybe that's just me, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
Well, that's a great note to end it on. That's all from me. Everyone, take care. We'll see you next time. Take it away, Hannah.
You're listening to the Great Canadian Aftermarket Podcast, brought to you by the publishers of Indie Garage and Jobber Nation. Connect with us online at indiegarage.ca and jobbernation.ca. A brand of Chat Integrated Media.